Okay, welcome back to the 26 and Glencoe Media Network podcast. I am your host, Marcus Flowers, aka Flo, aka Call Me What You Want, just don't call me lazy. And today I am here with a person who I have known for almost probably going close to a decade here. This man has just been super inspirational to me on my podcast journey and even on my journalism journey. He's always pushing the bar up. He's always raising the standard for what it means to be a content creator. And today I have Meelz TV with me. Meelz, how you doing today, man?
Yo, I'm doing okay. I'm doing okay for someone who just, has done a lot in the morning. I'm doing okay. I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to be talking to you on this podcast. We have known each other for quite some time.
Right.
Um, so yeah, I'm glad to be here, man.
Right. Now I was thinking about it the other day and it was just like you, J5, Jeff J, a lot of that from that original wrestle rap group. I was like, dang, those are like my first true like internet friends. Like I talked to
Right.
outside of the internet.
Right. I mean, it was to think of the amount of talent within that group and how much the majority of us has managed to kind of just stay together and stay true, and we
Right.
still ultimately wrestling fans at the end of the day. But I think most importantly, we respect everybody's work ethic and what they contributed and their ideas, and just kind of like-minded people. None of us are truly like spazzes in any type of way.
Right.
So I think that's why just even that core group has just managed to like stay together and just like continue on, man. But yeah, it's been a fun ride. It's been a
Yeah.
fun ride. That was like one of the first like big thing. I wouldn't even I guess it was a big thing. It was like one of the first things that I was like, oh wow, these are people that create and like do amazing things, and I have like actual access to them,
Right.
and being able to see kind of like how people's minds work or like things work or stuff like that.
Yeah, it was nuts when I first got added to the group me because it was like I followed a lot of them already, and I was just like, wow, like I can't believe I'm in this group. I was like going crazy. I started to tell my because I got in at the end of my college career, so I'm talking to like people I go to college. I'm like, yo, I'm in this group chat with like so and so. He works for like Complex and the Source and all this other stuff. So
Right. Yeah, you know what was weird when I was added to that group? It's just kind of funny now, considering that we've like done a podcast now for like umpteen years. I thought I was going to hate Justin so much. I thought, because I just felt like just naturally, just how I like my view on things and his view on things, and he was a little bit more. I mean, he's older now, so he's a
yeah,
lot less
yeah,
aggressive than he was on the internet before. But just how aggressive he was and like things that he said and like things that he do and kind of like how he carried himself, I thought I was going to hate him. And then find out that we have a mutual respect for one another. So it's just kind of funny how that thing
nice,
works. I thought he was gonna hate me too, but
right.
I don't know.
when
I don't
I
know.
when I first entered the chat, I was like, because it was like send a GIF at first, and I just popped in, and I
Hmm.
was so excited. I was like, "Hey, what's up, y'all?" And then Cass was like, "Fuck you, Marcus," and I was like, "Whoa, what did I what did I do wrong?" But
Well, listen. At least let's start. Shit, I don't even know what to say to that. I'm glad it's kind of how it started off with. Let's start off with at least let's get familiar with one another, even if it's in
right,
that type of way. But yeah, man, yeah, it was a fun time. That was like, geez, so long ago now.
I know it feels like forever ago. But so let's start off. So you weren't originally a podcaster. I originally because you didn't go to school for journalism, right?
Hell no.
Yeah. So
I guess in retrospect now, I probably, if
should
I
have.
knew now, yeah, if I knew now
Okay.
what I do now, I probably would have. But yeah, I definitely didn't go for
So
journalism.
how exactly did you get into journalism?
Okay, so it's weird. I never actually consider myself a journalist. Now, J5 would be like, bro, you're a journalist. And I'm like, all right, fine, whatever. But I never actually considered myself a journalist because I always felt like you had to put it to work and go to the school and learn all the trades and trick of the trades and all this other stuff like that. However, in terms of how I started it, I had a music blog called This Goes In. It was thisgoesin.com, and I had a blog. I was fairly successful. I mean, we reached about 1 million views sometime within like the first year or so. So I would say it
Nice.
was moderately successful in terms of just like me, something that I've worked on and like coming to actual fruition. But I used to write on that every day because my friends would
Mm.
be like, yo, you have all the latest new music. Put me on to the newest music. And I'm like, okay. And then eventually I was like, oh, I hit up my friend and he was like, oh, we should start a website. We should do this thing. He made the website. I was just the one writing for it. So he did like the
Okay.
semi easy work. I did all of the actual painstaking day-to-day thing. And I did that for 4 years. And when you do it, it's like your 10,000 hours type of thing that people
Right.
talk about. And putting in your 10,000 hours, I put in, it had to be 20, 30,000 hours because I was on that. The blog era back then was like, you had to be on it. You had to be quick. You had to make sure you had the first. And so people
Right.
actually come to the website. And I was there for the most part for the majority of 4 years. I would say probably until like the last 2 months of it, working completely by myself,
Mm.
um, writing articles, writing blog pieces, putting out music, reaching out to people to possibly interview, even though that never happened on that website. A lot of different things. So it was like, yeah, that like trained me. That was like my boot camp to train me for like kind of everything else that happened afterwards.
Right. And so with This Goes In, did that help you with you talk about your 30,000 hours? Did that help you now when it comes to like podcasting? Because you put out quite a bit of podcasts every week. And do you think that This Goes In prepared you for what you're doing now?
Actually, I'm going to say yes and no. So yes, from a standpoint of I've always been a hardworking person. So I
Okay.
don't know. It's just like even if I'm not like the best person for the job, I guarantee that I'm probably the one who's going to work the hardest. Which has afforded me plenty of opportunities in life to do various different things because there's like I like you because you work incredibly hard. Um, from that aspect, from the other aspect of podcasting, in terms of actually saying stuff and writing stuff, completely different world. I remember for This Goes In, I actually tried video interviews because I was like, okay, gonna get into video interviews. Everyone's kind of like pivoting to video.
Okay.
Um, going to try to do some video interviews. So I'm legitimately sitting on that interview, and it's the most awkward shit. I never released those videos. Um, I found one most recently as I was clearing my hard drive and putting stuff on like Google and all this other stuff like that. I found one recently. It is terrible. It is the worst thing on earth. I sound like an idiot. I look crazy. Um, but yeah, I mean, in some things, yeah, I think just in general, just keeping and staying consistent, which is ultimately what that kind of taught me. Is just like if you be consistent, you can get like 1 million views eventually, or like people will listen to your stuff, or the right people will listen. Consistency is kind of key, and that's kind of what that website taught me.
Right. That's super dope. So one of the standout things I remember from just your writing career is that it was the Dream 10th anniversary article
Oh
that you
yeah.
did. How was that? How was that experience? Because you got invited for like a intimate session, right?
Okay, I never actually got invited to that intimate session, but
Oh, okay.
that's perfectly fine though.
Okay.
The thing was, and I'll say this in terms of writing stuff, that was probably the first time I've anything that I've written has been acknowledged by the person that I'm writing about, to my knowledge, unless they've retweeted it or did something like. But actually seeing that verbal thing, I wrote a 10-year. I remember, what's so funny? I wrote that for thisisrnb.com. I always loved thisisrnb.com. Shout out to the previous runner of the website, James Wexler. He passed away a couple of years ago. Currently being run by Nikisha. I forgot her last name, but she's amazing as well. I wrote that article for that website. Funny thing, I pitched that article to so many websites before. Um, and it's just funny how things work because who knows if it would have been seen if I had pitched it to any other website. That's how
Right.
kind of like I always feel like things happen for a reason. Even the smallest things happen for a reason. So I pitched it to that website. I pitched it to so many websites before. Everyone was like, nah, we could do this in-house, or nah, we don't want to pay anyone to do it, or nah, we're not answering you at all. So eventually I get to This Is R&B because I know I'm cool with these people. They know I love R&B. I'd done a previous article on the 15-year anniversary of Confessions by Usher, which is my favorite album of all time. And I did one for that, and it did very well for them. That was another article that I pitched plenty of times to various different places, and people didn't give a shit about it, or they did their own, or all this other stuff. But that's just the writing game.
Right.
So I pitched it, and just kind of like to see months later, the owner of the website, he texted me and he was like, hey, The Dream acknowledged your article. Like, I'm at this sit down session as he's talking about, I think he was talking about it with Miss Info, about love versus hate, which is again another one of my favorite albums just of all time. It's just an amazing album. I love the writing about it. It kind of changed how I perceive R&B music in my eyes. So for him to acknowledge that was kind of crazy. I still have the video saved on my phone. I probably will never not take it off my phone, because it's kind of like, okay, at least people are seeing this. Like, I don't need particularly validation, but like, it's always nice when people, that the things that you're writing are getting to the places that you wanted to get to.
Right. And so with the dream notice in your article, do you think that was just part of the process with your 30,000 hours and just like putting in that work to a point where he noticed that? And even just like, how did you, because this is one of the things that sorry, this is a long-winded question. How did you deal with like the rejection from like publications? Because that's something I still like to this day. I'm like, oh, that like kind of hurts. How did you deal with that?
So the first part of that question, if it was part of 30,000 hours, I don't think so, but I think it would have been, I mean, yes, in terms of like, okay, I wrote it. It's a level of quality to it, a level of acknowledgement. I'm pretty sure he read it and it was just like, oh yeah, totally. But I also have to give credit to thisisrnb.com, which is just a great website for R&B. And I think a lot of R&B artists are grateful for that website. And it's like creating something with a niche and creating something to feed your audience, but also feed these people who are kind of like underrepresented in actual music itself. So I give a lot of the credit to that website, but I do give a little bit of a credit to myself as well. And then the second part of the question, how dealing with rejection, it's tough. I get salty, but I think I get salty and kind of just like, I do my, can I cuss on this?
Yeah, no, you're fine.
Okay. I do my general like, man, fuck them. And I just kind of like keep it pushing. I just have to say that for myself because it just makes me feel better. Like, it makes me, rejection actually amps me up in a way that it hasn't before. Instead of kind of getting me down, it actually makes me want to work harder to prove to people why they will no longer reject me. And that's kind of how I've kind of treated it for the last couple of years, because I do feel like everything happens for a reason, and some things are just like, okay, it wasn't meant to be, but this was meant to. I wasn't meant to. And I'll say this: I pitched the article to Complex before. It wasn't, and I've written for Complex before, but they were just like, oh no, it just wasn't part of their plan. And I understand it. It's probably not what they're gonna go for. I think they were done with like retrospectives, and I think they were pivoting the video or whatever. So I definitely did. But I don't know if the Dream would have saw it if it wasn't on Complex. I don't know if he would have saw it. So everything kind of happens for a reason. I kind of like, okay, I'm kind of more so because of that mind state of everything happens for a reason. Things will happen how they're supposed to happen. I just like, you know what? Fuck them. I'm just going to do me and do whatever. And it's going to be amazing. And that's kind of how I operate.
Right. Moving real quick past your professional career too. One of the things that's really stuck out with me with you over the past couple of months has been your journey as a runner. That actually And that's like crazy because I remember when you first started posting about it, you were like, I hate running, but here I am today because the gyms are closed. And that was like, okay, if Meelz can do this run and he hates it, okay, I'm glad I'm not the only one who hates running. So how did you just decide one day that, okay, I'm gonna just start running?
Okay, so I've ran various times over various amounts of years. One thing I will not do, but it usually happens in the summer. I won't run any other part of the year because running during cold weather means I have to run inside. I have to run on a treadmill. I hate treadmills. I don't recommend treadmills at all. They're terrible for your knees. If you do run it on it, do not run on it for a significant amount of time over a consistent amount of time. It is terrible for your knees. It's terrible for my knees. I'll say that.
Right.
It's bad. Um, so I hate running inside. I love running outside, but I still kind of hate running. I'm still not very good at it. I think it's more so consistency and like pushing myself and new challenges. I'm someone, actually a lot of people in the RNC radio group, they make fun of me because of all of the working out I do. Um, but I like the challenge of it, and I like pushing things, and I like pulling things, and I like pushing heavy shit and picking up heavy shit and all this other stuff. It's like a challenge. It's like instant gratification in a kind of way.
Right.
Running is kind of that because I'm pushing myself to a new limit that I've never really experienced and I've never tried and I've never done, and I'm still not very good at it. I can't run the fastest I've ran a mile is maybe like 9 minutes,
Mm.
and I was gassed. After that, I was done for. So it's like that's the fastest I can run a mile. I'm still not very good at it, but I kind of push myself because the COVID weight was real, and I'm
Right.
actually tired of it. Like it's when I got to the point where I put on pants and I couldn't fit in them, I was like, damn, this is ass. I kind of want to fix this. Um, which has happened to me many times in my life, of me putting on pants and be like, this doesn't fit anymore. Fuck. I'm gonna need to do something about this. So yeah, I mean that's my journey with running. I still kind of hate it, but it's something that I do, and I'm not really prepared. My body's. I was actually talking about this the other day. Sorry if I'm running too much on a tangent.
I know you're
Um,
fine.
my body is very strange in terms of the fact, like there's people who can eat whatever and will not gain much of any weight. I am not one of those people. I am one of those people who whatever I eat, it's accounted for. Like
Right.
strongly accounted for. So I really do have a lot of times to watch what I eat. And it sucks because I feel like I have to work twice as hard to lose the amount of weight that people can just like, lose instantly. But it's just part of the process. It's part of challenging myself. I like it. It's
Right.
fun. It takes my mind off a lot of different other things.
No, for sure. Is there a certain goal that you want to achieve with running, or are you just running to like keep the weight off and keep
I'm
consistent
running
with
to
it?
keep the weight off.
Okay.
There's no marathon in store. There's nothing. I was thinking about doing a 5K since I think I can actually run 5K, but not like consistently, but I can make it to the end of 5K. Let me say
Right.
that.
Right.
So I was thinking of doing one of those. But other than that, I really don't have any goal for running. It's strictly aesthetic, like to make sure I look good or feel good.
Right. Right. Okay. Just shifting gears back to your professional career. Let's talk
Sure.
about your podcasting career, because this is when, just like for me, just watching you over the years, this is when you like took it to a whole new level with your first podcast, the Two Belts podcast. So tell me how that came about.
Two Bells podcast came about because I'm best friends with Carlos, who was the co-host of that podcast. It was actually meant to have a third person, but there was no way we were going to commit him to a weekly basis of showing up to the studio. So it was only two of us. He's featured on the show regularly. His name is Jimmy. He's amazing.
Yeah.
Um, so Carlos wanted to do a podcast. I was against it initially because I said, mind you, this is 2015. I said, everyone is doing podcasts. I'm not doing that
Right.
shit. Um, Funny how it's 2020 and you can pretty much say the same thing.
Right.
And it was probably less in 2015, like way less. But he was just like, no, he thought as much writing as I do, I never get across my like funny or actually like personality within my writing. It's always like strict, you know, editorial research, blah blah blah, ABC. Very like, oh, I'm analyzing this in this particular way, and I'm using words to explain how I feel. Um, but he never felt like I actually got across my personality. So he wanted to do it, and he wanted to do it with me, and I was just like, okay, sure. So we started Two Belts podcast. It was the first podcast. We started it. We recorded it on a day. I think the first recording got lost to time. It just we had to record the entire first episode again the week later, but it was fun that we actually did it. And yeah, that's another thing. Consistency. I don't think
Right.
people would have realized it or signed on to be guests or do anything if we weren't doing. We did our first 100 episodes in the first 100 weeks. We never skipped. It was kind of insane. We never really skipped a week because we were re-recorded. He was going to school at, I was working at, just worked together. We were in the same place, same time, doing the same things, talking about it as friends. It just worked, and consistency proved to be probably the strongest thing about that podcast because every Sunday you knew it was coming, and yeah, it was fun.
Right, right. What were some of your highlights of the Two Belts podcast? One of my favorite episodes was the one y'all did with Shanae Curry. That was one of
Ooh,
my
okay.
that was one of my favorite episodes, and just hearing about her journey. But what about
That was
what were some of your favorite moments?
that's an amazing thing. I will tell you something about that off air.
All right.
um God, looking back at it now, I gotta actually look back now that it's actually uploaded. All the episodes are back online. They weren't
Okay.
initially before, but now they're back online. So now I gotta look at it because it was kind of really some time ago. And it always makes me doing things like this goes in Two Belts always makes me realize that you're going to when you're continuing to grow and put out things like some things are going to end and then sometimes no one will remember you for that part of your life. Like there are
Right.
people who follow me just now who have no idea about Two Belts. There are people who
Right.
follow me who had no idea about this goes in. But it's like consistently. So it's all that's why I always keep it kind of like in mind of like sometimes things are just phases I never really get to um fully. I don't allow them to become me. I allow this experience to be what it was, and it was a fun experience, and we kind of move on. But I think my favorite part of it were a lot of the early episodes because we were really, really unfiltered and kind of really not not aware of what we were actually doing or if people were listening or not. So we kind of just said anything.
Right.
And we invited anyone and we kind of did anything. So those are a lot of my favorite episodes. And then as time go on, the entire thing is really one of my favorite things because it's really kind of a growth of like, okay, then we started getting guests and I loved having guests on because a lot of
Right.
them were our friends. A lot of them were interesting people. A lot of them we had interesting discussions, some not so interesting discussions, but that's what you learn. Um, and then even the last run when we kind of knew it was it and we were just like all right, let's just try to have the best episodes that we can and have really fun with it. And it was amazing. I think geez, what can I say? I mean, usually episodes with if we had episodes with the forecast, those are some of my favorites. Episodes of Jimmy, those are my favorites. Anytime we talk about J. Cole, that was
Right.
amazing. Anytime that we talked about, gosh, I'm looking through all of them. I'm gonna listen to these one of these days. Like I'm gonna go back and listen to them. A lot of them, I edit them, they get put out in the world. I don't remember what I say, but people remember remember what we say, and I'm like, oh shit, I said that. Yeah, totally. Wow, we had amazing titles for these things. Okay, yeah, it's a it's a lot of it. I think it's a cop out answer, but a lot of it was my favorite, and it's still fun to do. I wish we could do them again, but that's kind of like it was what it was for a certain time, and you
Yeah.
know
Uh,
it's
I will say one of my another one of my favorite episodes was when you started having Johnny Five guest hosts at times, and
oh yeah,
I think the first one was when Carlos got in trouble, and,
yeah.
and it was like
Carlos.
It
got
was
arrested while
right,
we were supposed to do a podcast.
right.
100%.
And I was like, yo, I hope Carlos is all right. Like, I know the
That
show's
was a
gonna
stroke
go
of luck. That was a stroke of luck that Justin was the guest that day, because if we had no guest, I would not have known what to do in that sort of
on.
situation. I would have attempted to do it myself, probably failed horribly, and ended it in like 15 minutes. Um, but yeah, that was one of my favorite episodes too, because it was a crazy time. Because I'm like, we're about to record. Carlos actually pulls up, and we're like, okay, you get ready to record. He's like, yeah, I'm about to go do something. Be back in like 20 minutes. And then like 20 minutes goes by, and then like 40 minutes goes by, and then like 60 minutes goes by, and I'm like, where the fuck are these people? So I'm calling them, no one's answering. And then someone who was with them comes in, and it was pretty much like, blah! And I was just like, oh shit, that is crazy.
It
Fuck, how am I going to do the show? And the hardest part was trying to figure out how I was going to do the show, because Carlos handled all of the actual technical stuff. Like, he's with sound and stuff and plugging in wires and all this other stuff. I mean, the setup that I have is super easy now, and I'm thankful it was easy, but the setup that we had in the studio required some knowledge of actual shit.
right.
So he had his laptop there. I didn't know how to use his laptop. Luckily, the person who was there knew the password into his laptop, because I would not have known. It was a pretty stressful time. Like, it was insane now thinking about it.
Right.
Oh my God.
Yeah, one of the things I really just enjoyed about Two Belts was just how, like, I know y'all had your musical opinions, but what I liked about it the most was that it seemed like it was like two friends. And you mentioned how Carlos was your best friend. Would you have you ever done podcasts with like people you weren't necessarily friends with, or people who you have different opinions with?
Have I like hosted or just
Yeah,
like appeared on a have I hosted a podcast with someone I'm not friends with?
yeah.
No. No, I actually haven't.
So okay.
No, I wouldn't do that. I'm very particular in like the things I do and the decisions I make. I would not do that. Just unless it was like they were professional as well. But ultimately, at this point, I probably wouldn't do it.
Okay, very cool. I heard you laughing, so I'm sure you've had guests whose different opinions you just didn't agree with, though.
I've had this is not exclusive to Two Belts. I've had various points on podcasts where I, in my opinion, have had terrible guests. Like, guests that you had to drag something out of, guests that you
Right.
kind of like had to ultimately ignore, guests that who've ultimately ignored us, or who've had opinions. We nearly actually went back and forth on actual podcasts, but it's cool now because we're friends now. But it's interesting. It's interesting going through all of that.
Right. So from Two Belts to the A Show, there wasn't a dark period between Two Belts and the A Show that you took, you because you were doing both of them at the same time, right?
Yeah, I was doing both of them
Yeah.
at the same time.
So how did you the A Show really come about? Was it from like Justin being on Two Belts and noticing y'all had chemistry, or
No, Justin really wanted to do a wrestling podcast, and I told him I didn't have time for it because I was doing Two Belts every week. And he said to this quote, this is the infamous quote, "You are not Diddy. What do you mean you're too busy?" And I was initially offended by that because it's like, you don't value my time. If I'm telling you I'm busy, I'm telling you I'm busy. But ultimately, I like Justin a
right?
lot as a person. So, and I knew I liked wrestling a lot as a thing. So I decided, okay, let's at least try it out. If it turns out good, it turns out good. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Now it turned out great. So I just said, okay, we can do this on a week to week thing. And it was part of we wanted the initially, RNC was initially just a group chat, and we wanted to actually make it a tangible thing because we have amazing, talented people within our group, and we wanted to make it a thing. So it was one of the first podcasts to kind of like really push that RNC radio network channel thing off. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. But I will tell you, doing 2 podcasts a week it's tough as shit. It's tough as shit. But it was fine. It was fine. There wasn't really a problem until I started doing more podcasts.
So you basically became addicted to doing podcasts.
Pretty much. I would say, as you can hear from the way I accepted to do both Two Belts and A Show, none of them were under my accord. I didn't come up with the idea of doing these podcasts. Even It's a Challenge, right? So It's a Challenge, again, not my idea to do. I've always wanted to do a challenge podcast. Don't get me wrong. I love the
Right.
challenge. I love it more than a lot of things. But I never initially wanted to do the podcast. I was like, I don't have time for it. But my co-host Maggie, who's amazing, just celebrated her birthday a couple weeks ago. It was actually her birthday last year, where she pretty much begged me after. This is after many mimosas. Pretty much begged me to be like, "Hey, please do this. I really want to do this. I really, really, really want to do this." And I'm standing there in the middle of the street, like, I don't know if I want to do this. But then her friends are like, "You guys should do it." And I'm like, you know what? Sure, we'll figure something out. And we just started that podcast as well, and here we are. Like, I think the only one I justly started was The Lookout. Now that I think about it.
Nice.
Yeah.
So just looking back at the A Show, you guys are 155 episodes deep, right?
We are, yeah, depending on, I think we're about 150, might be 2 or 3, but we're getting there. I mean, we're definitely in the 150s for sure.
Nice. Do you think the A Show, when you started the A Show, do you think it would have accumulated this much success? Literally like a year and a half later.
I attributed any success that it would have did to Justin, because Justin was much more of a personality, and Justin was much more out there than I was. He actually had like things on his resume, and actually, I mean, he would say a lot of things regarding wrestling, and people either retweeted or hate him
Right.
for it. So I just knew that anything kind of with him would ultimately, people would listen, because people have listened to his stuff before. He had a podcast before we did A Show. He had a Voice of the Voiceless, and people listened to that. I listened to that. I was featured on that from time to time. So I attributed any success that they would have had to him. I did not know later on the line that people would actually like to hear what I have to say as well. It is very
Right.
strange. But it eventually grew from doing that podcast, because I think I have a sensible opinion on most things, not all things.
Right.
Most
Right.
things. But yeah, eventually it grew from that, and what can I say? It's gotten as big as I would hoped it would be, but not as big as I fully want it to be. And there are things that I think I want to do with the A Show to continue to expand it, to become bigger. I want it to be like, I've always wanted, after doing it for like 100 episodes, I was like, this needs to be like First Take.
Right.
This needs to be visually engaging. This needs to be audio engaging. This needs to be to the point. And a lot of people get on Justin because, I mean, I would say he's pro wrestling, and not like pro wrestling like the actual sport, but like pro wrestling. But he is very pro WWE and a lot of different things.
Right.
So they're like, oh, he always wants to work for the WWE. I think, honestly, the best thing, I mean, the WWE decides to dump a shitload of money on us, I'm not going to necessarily turn it down. However, I always think our strength was that we were completely unbiased from the WWE and umbrella. And our strength was that we can cover anything. And I think professional wrestling is a sport, and just entertainment. I won't say more entertainment, because I think it's more entertainment than it's an actual sport. But I think overall, it needs voices on a sort of platform to be talking about these things unbiasedly and have these opinions. And yet people are going to get mad, because I think people with any kind of art, wrestling is kind of an art in the way you do it, and the way you perform, and the way you treat, and how you carry yourself, are going to get offended by it. But that's just part of how it goes.
Right.
I want to see it on that sort of platform. I want it to become actually that. We live on separate coasts, have never met each other in real life before, but still managed to have this great chemistry in terms of doing the show, and I want to elevate that. I think it could be amazing. I think it could be really, really big.
Right. And when you talk about the A show having like a type of first take type of thing, do you feel like the War Report, the writers room, spot callers, are those like right after you when it comes? Do you want them to have the same type of success, to have their own type of first take as well?
So I think I can't see them being a similar first take thing. Maybe the War Report, but
Okay.
I can't see them having a first take thing because they all have different kind of styles, and we
Right.
try to stray away from having tons of podcasts that do the same thing that the A show does or have the same voice as A show does. So I think Spot Callers, it's its very own like nitty gritty talk about I don't want to say the underbelly of professional wrestling because I don't want to make it seem like they talk
Right.
about like homeless people like boxing or something like that. But like they talk about very niche,
Niche. Yeah.
far away from WWE type of things, and sometimes it's like TNA, but like they they stray away a lot of different from that. I think the rewriters room is an interesting concept as well because it takes this concept of like, well, what would happen if this happened, which is what everyone thinks about, and it's more so like I love the idea. The idea, I'm not sure if the creator was brought to us. I can't even remember at this point, but I love the idea for the podcast, and we had another idea for another podcast, but we just have to have someone to do it because I don't have time. I say that now, and then I'm going to end up doing it. But I love the concept for that one because it's kind of like using your brain and kind of like taking on that. And then War Report is just different because it comes from an NXT AEW sense where it's not as glamorous as like the WWE stuff, or not as, it's also not as it's just not as sometimes I feel for Cyrus because sometimes the television isn't amazing,
Right.
and it's clearly that it shows, but ultimately it's a different type of product. I think War Report is probably the closest thing to the A show, but we strive to have kind of all of our shows have a different flavor to it.
Right, for sure. And also with the A show, you also have the Lookout. How did the Lookout come about? And I know that was an RNC creation, but how did that start as well?
So Jeff and I were both in the RNC radio group, and I noticed we had a lot of things in common, a lot of things that a lot of other people in the group didn't have in common. I say namely Pokemon. Pokemon is a thing where
Right.
it's very particular. I know when I'm going to be very good friends with someone because they check a couple of boxes, and one of them is Pokemon. So I usually know I'm going to be good friends with whoever person. Actually, that was legitimately the box that checked that I knew that Carlos was probably going to be my best friend for a long time. Because he likes Pokemon, he likes wrestling, he likes Dragon Ball Z, he likes a lot of things that I like, and I just kind of know the type of person that you are. But Jeff, once we talked separately, we found out we had a lot of things in common. We were born like 2 weeks apart. We both like the same thing, experience setup. We both still like the same thing. It's not like he liked Pokemon 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and doesn't like it now. He likes it now.
Right.
So we knew that we had all these things in common. So we just said, hey, I like Dragon Ball. You like Dragon Ball. Dragon Ball is incredibly popular at the time being. It was for like the first week that we did the podcast. It was terrible because that's when Dragon Ball Super actually ended, which was the first week we started the podcast. So we're kind of like, oh, now we got to talk about the other stuff. But we had thought it'd be back by now.
Yes, I did too.
Here we are.
Right.
But we had that in common, so we decided we wanted to talk about it. We had it planned. Jeff, actually, it's funny. Jeff was the first guest, but he was not the co-host for the podcast. It was initially going to be just, you listen to the first like 4 episodes, it's just me hosting the podcast, and I was going to bring on people who love Dragon Ball Z. That's actually, now that I think about it, very close to another podcast that I like, which is the Sailor Moon Fan Club podcast.
Right. Yeah, I started listening to that too. Yeah.
But she does that, and she brings in a lot of guests, and she brings in a lot of interesting people to help to talk about Dragon Ball. Everyone has a Dragon Ball memory. Anyone who matters to me has a Dragon
Right.
Ball memory. Um, so we started there. So I did the first episode. I did the first 2 episodes with Jeff. They were amazing. I was like, oh yeah, this podcast is going to get on a roll. Um, I did the 3rd episode with my friend Flash. Again, I've known him longer than Carlos for a very long time. We both know Dragon Ball because we both were in 6th grade watching it at the same time.
Right.
So I had him on. 4th episode was Carlos and Jimmy. That, I will say candidly, was when the idea of I need an actual co-host on it ran off rails, because I can tell you, I'll say this candidly, I edited so much out of that episode that it's not funny. That episode is probably close to twice as long as you heard. I don't have the original one anymore because I don't know if I have the original one anymore. A lot of that episode is me talking about Dragon Ball, Carlos making fun of me, Jimmy joining in, and then me awkwardly staring at them because I'm working on something and I'm trying to be like my perfectionist in this, and me like glaring at them and then deciding, let's continue talking about the show. And there's so much edited out of that show. I had to talk with Carlos afterwards because I was just like, I was pretty like,
He did.
I guess you could, yeah, I was pretty mad.
Right. Right.
I was pretty mad. But that's when I knew I needed guests, and I was just like, I'm about to bring Jeff back on for episode 5. I might as well ask him. And I asked him, and he was like, yeah, I'm totally down. I think he was at that point, the plans were in motion for RSPN or started already or something along those lines, because I didn't want to boggle him down, because I'm always very wary of his time, even though he gives me any amount of time that I ask for from him. So I'm always wary of his time. But he said, yeah, I'll do it. And we were off to races from then. And that is legitimately, the Lookout is the podcast where I can legitimately remember a time. It's so funny now I think about it because we were such dorks. We were about to record the podcast and we're just like giddily like laughing because it was just like, I can't believe we get to talk about this. And we're just like, we talked for like 2 hours before we actually started the show. And we're just like laughing about like things in our lives and things about how we felt about things, but just like talking about anime and stuff. And we just got so happy about doing the podcast together. And then we just started it and it was so fun. It's one of the funnest things that I do, which is why I'll never probably stop doing it.
Right. Just last thing, you mentioned Pokemon, and one of the favorite things that's come out of the RNC network has been the Mount Silver podcast. I was a guest on that, but that was really one of my that's one of my favorite RNC things that y'all have over there. So how did y'all convince Pafifi to get on with that?
That was another podcast that we didn't know was going to be a podcast until we legitimately 10 minutes before we hit record, we decided it was going to be a podcast. The idea was it was supposed to be the Lookout meets late fees because we were recording a movie. It was Pokemon. It was a movie. It was the first what was it? What's the fucking name of this movie? Pikachu, Detective Pikachu.
Right.
So we were like, okay, we set up the time, et cetera, et cetera. It was supposed to be me, Jeff, Justin, and Pat. Because Pat and Justin represent late fees and me and Jeff represented Lookout, and we're, molding of worlds. We've done it before. Big Eyes, Black Variant. Just kind of how it was supposed to be. It was initially that would be how it was if somehow X was just like, and now I want to hop on the Big Eyes. But Justin couldn't make it for whatever reason. I think he got trapped at work or whatever the hell. So he couldn't make it. But we just realized at the time, I was like, yo, Jeff, me, and Pat, we love Pokemon. Like, love it. Like, and Justin likes Pokemon, but he doesn't love it like we love it. And I will stand by that. He'll probably say something offhanded about that, but he doesn't love it like we love it. We love it with all its flaws and everything of the matter. He does not accept it that way. He
Right.
accepts the flaws and just like, this fucking sucks. And I don't know why you guys are giving it a pass. It's like, because we love it.
Right.
But so we realized that. So it started us three. So we just like, oh, what should we call it? And it was a playoff of the Lookout name. I was like, oh, let's just call it Mount Silver Podcast. It's a playoff of the Lookout. It's whatever. It's kind of the same thing. So we did it. It was episode 1. We weren't sure when we were gonna do any new episodes. We came up with an idea of like, okay, let's talk about the games, and have everyone kind of join in, talk about the games, and that's kind of how it got started. The episodes run longer than I would love. In my brain, most podcasts shouldn't last over an hour. A lot of those episodes ran longer because we just love talking about Pokemon and there's so much to talk about. But those were like fun episodes. The first season of Mount Silver, to me, it's so fun to revisit all those games and talk about them candidly and just kind of talk about our experiences. And I probably won't get those back in terms of like the experience of talking about it back, because I would love to do that season over and over and over and over again, because I love talking about it that way. But we'll see. I know I want to continue doing the show, but we have no ideas for how the show's moving forward. But I do know I want to continue to do the show because I do love Jeff and I do love Pat, and it's fun to do the show. It just is.
Right. And lastly, these aren't podcast questions, but how do you feel about I know you mentioned it in our chat. How do you feel about Pokemon Journeys, and are you excited for Crown Tundra?
So Pokemon Journeys, I think it's different in the way it's like it's different, but it's not. I have been closely but also far watching Pokemon anime. I'm the only one who doesn't. Not the strongest of Pokemon fan. Very rarely watches the anime, because the anime, in my opinion, and in a lot of people's opinion, compared to most anime, is shit.
Right.
It resets every time. Same character, same problems, same everything. It's obviously meant to be a kid show.
Right.
But I love Pokemon, so what am I gonna do? It's legitimately how I know to pronounce names of Pokemon, which no one else does know. So I think Journeys is great, and a different thing of like, okay, we're not doing a different set of thing, but also it's a lot of the same shit because it's the same show. It's not very rarely. I think everyone kind of wants a much more mature Pokemon anime, and they refuse to give it to us because it just makes more money this way. And I understand it. And they've given us little spin-off things of like, the little YouTube series and all this other stuff. They're like, okay, here's this, here's for your appetite and stuff like that. But ultimately, they're not giving us what we actually want. And what was the second one?
Are you excited for Crown Tundra?
Yeah, no. I'm kind of over the game. I know it's just another checkpoint of like stuff like that. It maybe should have came out all at once.
Right.
But Crown Tundra, am I excited for it? No. After the first one, the Isle of Armor, I'm not excited for it. That's actually probably the effect that they wanted the least.
Right.
But it's their first time doing DLC. They're figuring it out. Now they've got to actually know. They got to make all these parts connect somehow instead of having them be their own kind of thing. But I'm not really excited for Crown Tundra. I want the remakes. Give me the Diamond and Pearl remakes, please. I'm ready for remakes. That's one of my Gen 4 is one of my favorite generations of the game. I want the remakes. Hurry the hell up. Yeah, that's all I can say.
Right. And just going back to Pokemon Journeys, I will say, because I've been watching it on Netflix, and I will say the Ash is putting together quite a team to I think he's gonna beat the brakes off of Leon.
I don't know,
really,
but he is creating a very formidable team. He probably will win. Don't get me wrong. He probably will win.
Right.
But there's so much with the show that they're just not like, okay, Leon can Gigantamax his Charizard. So what the hell when do we get to this arc where Ash is learning to Gigantamax and stuff like that and actually consistently learning it? He learned it in that one episode. We haven't seen it since. He's now just fighting people aimlessly. Right. It's fun, but also like the show needs a little bit of an arc. There's no direction with the show, which is fun. Don't get me wrong. I think the show's fun. I love watching it because it's fun. But there's no direction to this actual show itself, like none at all. But it's fun. It's fun. I've already cleared out the second part. Like,
right.
it's
No,
fun.
same. One of the crazy things when you talk about them not having a plot, I will say when Ash beat the leader, the like substitute gym leader in Vermilion City, it was Vermilion City, and he jumped like 5,000 slots. I was like, bruh, this was his first battle. I was like,
I think it's because they were high ranked, and then now it's like, okay, well, if you beat this ranked person, obviously you've got to be incredibly strong. Like if he had beat someone close to his rank, he probably wouldn't have went up a lot. But since he beat someone high ranked or like somewhat high ranked, then he went up. But it's just weird how they do it. The show needs much more of an arc. That's what everyone in kind of Pokemon world. That's what they really want. They want a much more mature show, don't get me wrong, but they actually want like an arc that's actually followed and rewards you for watching the actual shows instead of these episodic things that are like quests that just happen in the middle of the show. But yeah.
Right. One thing I will say that was just super fun was just when I saw Go just throwing a Pokeball, throwing like the Pokeballs and not even battling. And then the next day, the Isle of Armor released, so I started taking that approach as well. And I said, wow, this actually really works. Like I don't have
listen, that's my Pokemon Go technique. That's my
right.
That's my I just throw things. I don't actually, I mean, you can't battle things in Pokemon Go really, but just throw. And it's actually become my game thing as well. I just throw it because at this point, there's so many different, even in the game, there's that fastball, that quick ball, that night ball, that dust ball. Just throw it, bro. Like if they start to kicking out, then beat them up. But just throw it. Yeah, that's it. He's definitely influenced me in that way as well.
Right. No, for sure. But once again, I just want to thank you, Meelz, for coming on the show. I really appreciate you. Do you have anything to plug?
All the podcasts that I do. That's what I'm coming here to plug. Man, I would love to plug The Lookout just because we do an amazing job. And I'm very happy to have you on the team as well, because I don't know if you know this. I had plotted. I don't want to say I knew since the beginning. I'd wanted you on since the beginning. I knew that I wanted, because from the work that you did with Wrestle Rap and everything that kind of happened afterwards and stuff like that, I just knew how hard you worked, and I knew the ideas you brought to the table and how you carry yourself as well. It's something that I appreciate, and like we wouldn't talk to you until this day in our wrestling groups if we didn't like you or anything rather, or if I didn't respect you in every way and you weren't on my brain. To like anytime that we're coming up with like a pseudo wrestling group chat, that you're on my mind.
Right.
But you know, you do great stuff. I'm very grateful to have you on our team to help us do great stuff. And I think we're going to do great things together. And I think just the entire Lookout team are poised to do great things together. So that's why I want to plug The Lookout.
Appreciate it. But yes, thank you once again. Just follow us on all social media platforms at 26 and Glencoe Media Network. Follow Meelz on Twitter and Instagram at Meelz TV. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Flows My Hero. And until next time, peace.
All right, everybody. Y'all know who it is, Metro Meta and
at One Marcus Flowers.
And we'd like to thank you for watching and listening to our content. We'd like to thank you even more if you leave a like, a comment,
subscribe. Definitely subscribe. We need that. Subscribe, subscription.
Hey, don't forget to share with all your friends and tell us how you feel.
And tell a friend to tell a friend to tell a friend that you got it from 26 and Glencoe Media Network.
Keep it real.